Hey everyone, in today's video I'm going to cover the things you should know or consider before you pick your first gun for upland hunting. Hey everyone, Mitch from the Upland Path channel. On today's video I'm going to cover the things you should consider or know before choosing your first gun for upland hunting. Now there's a lot of guns that exist out in the market. What I wanted to cover in this video is things you should consider or know going into choosing a gun. So the first thing that I'm going to start off with is, what are you hunting? The biggest thing is what you're hunting will determine to a degree what type of gun you should be using. Now whether you're in the grouse woods up north or you're on the prairie shooting sharptails or pheasants, that's usually going to determine what type of gun you should have, mostly because it's going to determine how many shells you're going to be carrying with you or the type of terrain that you'll be excluding. If I'm in the north woods, usually I'm going to want a gun that's maybe not as powerful, but also very lightweight, and usually I don't need a higher gauge. Whereas if I'm out hunting pheasants, I can usually have a bigger gauge if needed. I want to carry more shells, especially for late season. So these are all things that you should be considering when you're choosing a gun. Now, there's a lot of makers of guns out there. If you go out and search, you're going to get bombarded with the different selections. On today's video, I'm not going to cover all the different brands or types. I'm just going to cover the very basics of things that you should know before. So the biggest thing that I will start off with is the types of guns or the style of gun. So I have some examples here. Not all of these are mine, but I just want to give you guys some reference. So the most common nowadays, I will say, that you'll see is a semi-automatic, or also known as a gas or inertia-driven shotgun. So when you're looking online, you'll usually see those listed as a gas or inertia. So there's just a different style in which how it reloads this shell into the shotgun, as well as the recoil impact. So semi-automatics in general can carry more than 2 shells, all the way up to 4, and if you have an extended tube, it can get 5 or 6 depending on what you're needing. So what I really like about a semi-automatic is for that late season pheasant. So usually when you up your limit up to 3 pheasants, it's nice having some extra shells. But some of the limitations that we'll get into is you're only limited to 1 choke with a semi-automatic. So the next style, and there's kind of 2 different styles within this, is an over-under, or you'll hear a double barrel. Now I would consider probably an over-under or a side-by-side to be considered probably the most safest gun. The reason being, it's very obvious when this is unloaded. It's broken open is what you'll hear. A break open action is another term for it. And so when you're hunting in the field, if you just throw this over your shoulder, it's very obvious to people around you that, hey, my gun's unloaded. I'm not going to be able to misfire or cause an accident. So the other style is very similar to an over-under. It's just turn sideways, and this is a side-by-side or SXS is another way you'll hear it. Very similar to an over-under. It's just a different preference for style, different grip for you, but this is an English style side-by-side, also made by Winchester here, and this is a 16 gauge. So now once you get past style, the next thing that you'll want to consider is gauge. So there's a lot of gauges out there. As you get a little bit more advanced and better at your shot, I would say you can go up to those sub gauges is what you'll hear, but the most common gauges you're going to find on the market are going to be your 12, your 20s, and then your 410s. So 12 gauge is going to be a bigger gauge. It's going to have more impact on you. 20 gauge is probably like the most common sub or minimum gauge, and then you have your 410, which is the smallest gauge available. So for hunting in general, gauge will determine kind of what you're hunting. So usually bigger bird, you're going to want a bigger gauge in general, or it can also determine the number of shells you want to carry. So now, for example, if I'm in the grouse woods, I will usually use my 20 gauge just because it's a smaller bird. It's usually a lighter weight gun, so I can usually get by pretty easily. I only usually get 2 shots at a bird just because of how quick they are and the terrain that I'm in. But for pheasants, I'm going to usually bump up to that 12 gauge, or usually also can use a 20 gauge. Most commonly I'm using my 20, or even a 16 is another great option for you. 16 gauges are a little bit more rare out there, I will say, so it's sometimes hard to find shells for it, or the varieties of shells that you would be able to get with a 20 or a 12 gauge, just because those are the most common brands for you. The next thing that you'll want to consider is weight. So obviously as you go up in gauge, or I should say down in gauge, so 12 being one of the lowest gauges you'll probably carry. It's going to be a lot heavier than a 20 gauge or even a 410 gauge. So if you're walking along the prairies and say you're maybe doing 10, 15, even 20 miles a day, you're going to want a lighter weight gun. So usually when you're searching guns, they'll give a specification of the weight for your gun, and that's something you will want to consider when you're hunting. Other things you'll want to consider is also chamber sizes. So each gun is going to call out kind of the chamber size that it allows. So variations can be 2 3/4, 3 inch, and then 3.5 inch. So for pheasant hunting or upland hunting, I would say in general, I have a 3 inch chamber gun just so I can bump up to 3 inches for those late seasons if I need it. Or if you're a duck hunter, it's a versatile gun in that way. But most common shells that I'm using is a 2 3/4 inch. So biggest thing you'll want to consider if you're finding a gun that's a 2 3/4, that means you can only shoot 2 3/4. But if you have a 3 inch chamber, you can shoot 2 3/4 or 3 inch guns, or shells, I should say. So what does that look like? So I have a 2 3/4 shell and then a 3 inch shell, so not much variation, but again, you're only going to be able to shoot the 2 3/4 and 3 inches in the 3 inch chamber, but you can't shoot a 3 inch in a 2 3/4. Just clarifying. The one thing I did want to call out is shells. So you're going to usually see 12 gauges can be in a variety of colors. The most common is red, just for federal, but 20 gauge will always be yellow. Kind of just a neat trick is that the reason that they're yellow is so you can see it, because a 20 gauge can actually go down a barrel of a 12 gauge, and if you misload it by chance or you're grabbing belts and you're quickly loading it, if it goes down a barrel, you want to be able to see it, and such that you don't load a 12 behind it and then shoot it and then your gun explodes on you. So it's more of a safety precaution, and that's why shells are usually yellow. For 16 gauge, it can also be in a variety of colors, but the most common color I'll see is purple shell. So again, it's just different brands, different companies will change the color of their shells, but 20 gauges are always yellow for you. Now, the other thing that goes into guns is you'll hear of choke sizes, or choke restrictions is another way to term. So the most common chokes that you'll hear are cylinder, improved cylinder, modified, improved modified, and full. Now, there's varieties within that. You'll usually hear of, it's based on the brand, so Carlson, choke tubes, etc. They'll have different call outs for it, but the most common are those 5. And when you're hunting, you're going to want to change your choke based on the terrain that you're hunting in, as well as the game that you're hunting in, as well as the season. So if I'm out in the North Woods and it's earlier season, or for pheasant, and the type of dog that I have, I'm usually going to be using a cylinder or an improved cylinder. And all that means is my pattern will be wider, shorter distance. As you bump up to a full choke, that means your pattern will be tighter at that same distance, or kind of as you can shoot farther and it'll hold that pattern for longer. So the further the birds are getting away from you, usually the tighter the choke you'll need to use, or the tighter restriction choke you'll have to use for your gun. Now, as I said, with a semi-automatic, one of the limitations with it is that you only get 1 choke in your gun. Compared to over-under or side-by-side, I can have 2 chokes based on kind of the game or the bird that flushes on me. I can quickly change which shell I'm going to be using first. So if it's further away, I can quickly jump over to a modified choke and shoot that and hopefully knock down the game. Otherwise, if it's close, I can continue using my improved cylinder or a cylinder choke for that. So I will change my chokes. Usually when you buy a gun or purchase a gun, it will come with a choke kit for you from the manufacturer. You can also buy chokes off-brand. Carlson choke tubes is probably a great resource for you. But you can quickly change your chokes. They usually come with a change kit, and it usually depends on that. So if it comes in a fancy kit like that, or it will just come in a single tube like this. So this is my full choke that I haven't loaded yet. Now, the last thing to consider when buying a gun is also considering yourself in these situations. So guns go boom, that's a loud noise, so make sure you're always using hearing protection. Consider it whether it's a foam tip, but I personally recommend WildEars. It's a electronic hearing protection that also enhances the sounds around me, but also then dampens the sounds of the gun when it goes off. So hearing protection is a big thing when you're considering going out shooting, whether it's at the trap or in the field. So one thing I would consider is getting that when you purchase a gun, is just because you want to protect your hearing right away as you start beginning. So Now, the last thing I'll end is the price of guns. So you're going to usually see a wide variety, anything from $200 for a shotgun all the way up to, you can get to the custom shotguns or the very special shotguns that are going to be around that $5,000 to $10,000. So as you're starting out, I would personally recommend getting something around that $500 to $1,000 shotgun. The reason being, you're going to get what you pay for. So the higher price items are going to be better materials. Usually they're going to be lighter weight for you. They're going to have better robustability as well as repeatability for shooting. Whereas maybe a lower price shotgun is going to be a little bit heavier, may not cycle as well for you if you have a semi-automatic, as well as it may be more available to like things such as rust. So the last thing I'll cover is the finishes of guns. So I personally like a walnut finish for my guns. It's a very traditional upland style. And then you can usually get graphics. You also can just get a standard walnut with just a plain, no graphics on it. But in general, finishes will be black. It was the most basic. It's all usually plastic, but black. And then everything's black on it. You can get camo style. You usually see that for your waterfowl hunters. You can get a walnut, you can get blue steel, you can get bronze, you can get it colored. And then there's also, they're coming out with some Cordoba, which is a rust resistant material for your shotgun. So again, those things are just going to cost more money. It's more of a cosmetics things than anything, but all the guns are going to operate the same in general for that brand. So now this is just a quick overview of things you should consider for purchasing your first upland hunting gun. It's not everything. There's a lot of brands out there. If you have specific questions, feel free to message me. I'll do my best to give you options. Otherwise, there's a lot of resources out there. Target Focus Life is a great channel that I would highly recommend. They do breakdowns of all these guns, shows kind of how they operate, pros and cons to each of them. So if you have a chance, go check out that channel for more specific details on specific guns themselves. So I hope you guys are enjoying this content. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, I'll see you out in the field.